Most important person is Lev Sterling, NPUS Chair, Mr. Caesar Mitchell, Councilman for at-large District 1. Host 1. And this is a brother Brad from Clear Winslow's office. This represents the levels of collaboration that we all hope for and wish for in our communities, and we are so thankful to have our elected officials here as well as many volunteers. What I'd like to do is just do a brief explanation of what we're trying to do here with the NPUT Community Food Project. This project was named after a USDA grant, and we're doing what a lot of nonprofits do, or community groups, which is to retrofit our programming to meet the requirements of a particular funding source that we'd like. What the Community Food Project grant with the USDA goal is to try to help create local food economies across the country, recognizing the increased cost of fuel and the problems with an industrial agriculture system that we experience with the recent salmonella contamination of tomatoes. We know that food grown locally is best for financial, economic reasons as well as health reasons. And so what we're doing is we're looking at all the land available in NPUT. We're trying to assess the open spaces that are available for urban agriculture, which is a generic term. But then we're going to grade different parcels about what's the best use. A parcel of land about this size, which is about 2 acres, we say it's good for an urban farm. Something smaller than this, about the size of this patch right here, would be good for what's called a market garden or a community garden. But then we also talk about institutional gardens like senior citizen gardens or school gardens. We call edible schoolyards, where the children learn through the curriculum, through the outdoor classroom.
So this edible schoolyard, my hope is that the Atlanta Public Schools and the leadership at Brown Middle School, through the principal, Mr. Underdew, will take this on and really look at ways to integrate this focus on urban agriculture all throughout the curriculum. So when young folks are having conversations about math, they're talking about the growing cycles for urban agricultural projects. When they're talking about literature, they're reading all about the germination process of seeds and seeing all this stuff come to life for them that's captured in textbooks in their backyard right next door to the school is really exciting. And so this edible schoolyard work for us is really going to be phenomenal.
And we also talk about personal gardens. We want people to have gardens in the back of their backyards. We want orchards in the front instead of yards that you have to mow and use water. Because we believe that the future of sustainable development is not just green housing or green jobs or saving trees. It's about closing the gap between where people live and where food is grown, so that you shorten the energy use, as well as empower people to have food security, as well as to give them a greater sense of use of the ecology, how they're connected to the land, to try to sort of re-civilize ourselves, because we become so disconnected from nature that we don't really understand the repercussions of our decisions. And so when you put a tomato plant in the ground, watch it grow, and then eat from that plant, you are transformed in your consciousness about what it means to be a custodian of the land and custodian of your environment. So the vision is broad, but our particular focus in Southwest Atlanta, because of the socioeconomic conditions of our community, our thrust is economic development. We say there's only 2 ways to create real wealth in this world, is either dig it out of the ground in terms of gold or minerals, or you can grow it out of the ground. So we're growing original wealth. It's small marginal wealth, but over time it will accumulate with value-added products and markets and organic vegetables, which have a higher price return than typical vegetables. We believe that we will actually provide jobs for people. Where I learned this work was in Houston, Texas, and in that community, they have a farmer's market called the Bayou Market, that if people grow for that market restricts people to bring food. You have to be within a certain mile radius to bring food to that market, meaning you don't have to compete with a farmer who has economies of scale. You're only competing with people that have the same situation you have. In that market, my mentor, his name is Dr. Bob Randall, is a gentleman who runs a group called Urban Harvest in Houston. He said that people are making $15 an hour growing for that market. And so we believe we can create jobs with this work. We believe we can turn around communities. We believe we can connect people. There are people here who didn't know each other that are making relationships today. There are people here who feel good about their community that they didn't feel good about it before. We're not just growing food, we're also cleaning up around us. This is a civic powerhouse, is urban agriculture. It's the only silver bullet that I know of that fixes all the problems that we deal with. Everything else just does one part of it. Now, urban agriculture is not going to change the world, but what it will do is put a spark of inspiration into people and return hope to where people have been hopeless, because it will remind us that our future is in our own hands. And so what we are asking today, beyond the support that Brother Caesar Mitchell's office has provided in terms of the barrel dumpsters from the sanitation department, in terms of workers from the community service with the courthouse, in terms of supplies from the tool bank, future support we'd like to see is we'd like people, first of all, to buy a share in this market. Where we're selling this food is that you pay $400 up front and you get a basket of food for all the weeks of the growing season, which is about 13 to 15 baskets of food. Now that's gonna beat any price at Kroger's, I guarantee you, and the food's gonna be fresher. You'll be able to shake hands with the person that grown it. That's an experience that we haven't had for many generations. We're asking people to buy shares, and if you can't buy a share, we're asking you to come here on Sundays between 2 and 6. Every Sunday will be market day starting July 13th. And you'll be able to come here and make retail purchases based upon the prices that are going that day. And then if you can't do that, then we just like for you to just come and learn about gardening, to donate, hang out with us. We have cookouts, we have music, and just really rebuild community. And so I'm very glad to have everybody here today. And thank you for putting up. My phone's ringing, that's my cue.
Hi, everyone. We are here with our 20th, I believe, panel with the 41st and 42nd great candidates that are running for office. We've got Cubby Nkromo. If I'm mispronouncing that, please correct me, who you saw in the opening video. He is running, he's a Green candidate running for Michigan's 10th congressional district. And we have Rebecca Whiting here. She's a Libertarian running for Senate in Minnesota. And Rebecca was part of candidates for Assange. There's been a clip I've been playing quite a bit about ballot access of great thing that Rebecca said before. So we do have Michael Harbaugh's here somewhere, or he'll be back in a moment. But I just thought this was a really exciting topic to talk about. We typically are talking about war, and I thought, well, we'll mix it up a little bit and we'll talk about parasites. No, just kidding. We'll talk about how growing your own food, as you said in that opening clip, that was something about salmonella back then, 17 years ago. But, if you grow your own food, you eat local, you're less likely to be catching things from mass-produced food. So why don't I'm going to hand it over to Phil, and then you guys introduce our candidates.
All right. I'm Phil Anderson. I'm in Wisconsin. I've been involved in libertarian politics in a variety of ways for a very long time. And I also live on a farm, a 4-acre farmette with my fiance. And one of the things, I love that clip that we were watching before the show started. There's a lot of the background principle of choosing your dependencies, I guess, rather than being forced to be dependent on the government or the formal economy to do things. You create networks that aren't necessarily that can access government, but not necessarily be dependent on them. And that was beautiful. And the only thing I would add to that is chickens. Animals are part of urban agriculture too, and chickens are very productive. They can give you a meal a day between a couple of chickens, and you don't have to wait till they're ripe.
And you might not be paying $9 a carton for eggs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have 32 chickens. We get about 25 eggs a day, and it doesn't cost very much at all to feed them. They're free range most of the day, so. Mm-hmm. I know they can't be quite as free range in an urban environment, but I just wanted to mention that I have tremendous respect for the farming aspect of what both of you bring to the table. And hello, especially to Rebecca, because you're our neighbor next door. I'm in Wisconsin. You're running for Senate, which I've done twice and might do again in 2028. So drive on.
Cool. Okay. Well, why don't we start with Cubby?
Good evening.
Good evening.
How would you like me to start?
Oh, just tell us who you are. And well, I already said where you're running, but that video, if I didn't already say this on air, is 17 years old. So you've been at this for a long time.
Yeah. I actually found out recently because I'm writing a book, and I found out in my research with my aunts, because both my parents are deceased.
And I found out that both of my grandfathers, my matrilineal and my patrilineal grandfathers, were sharecroppers.
Oh, wow.
So my father had a garden when I was growing up. And then my brother told me, Marvin, who's like 5 years older than me, he just told me like last week that he remembers a conversation where my paternal grandfather was over the house and told my father that looks like there's some good soil in the backyard. Why haven't you planted a garden for your family?
Yeah.
So, because my father was a Marine and a factory worker, laborer, so he didn't, I don't think he grew professionally. But ever since that conversation, I always remembered there was a garden in the backyard. My first experience with hyperlocal food was a cherry tomato out of that garden. He used to keep a salt shaker in his back pocket when he gardened. And he would shake a little salt on the tomato and pop it right in my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So
Beautiful.
I'm an urban farmer. I thought because of social consciousness, but I'm actually an honest farmer, you know.
Runs in the family.
Runs in the family. Who knew
That's
that?
beautiful. That is
Cool.
beautiful.
Well, I'll share this GoFundMe that you have up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It said, for the love of food and farm. So I'm from, my name is Kwabena, Cubby, and Nkromo. Cubby is a sort of nickname. It's just, I really started using it because it fit better on campaign signs than Kwabena. I seriously, you know, it is a linguistic derivative in the language my name has come from, which is a West African language in the country of Ghana. But it's just very convenient to help Americans get their mind around a different name. And I know Barack wish he had thought of it too, but but I'm actually a Native American. You know, I was born in Boston. My parents were migrants, economic migrants, maybe even terror migrants. You know, you just never know when Black people move from the South. You don't know if it's money they're looking for or they're running from the Klan, you know, in that generation. So I don't have any family knowledge about that. But both parents were moved by their parents to Boston in their generation. So I'm a first generation Bostonian from the Carolinas. My mother's from Warrenton, North Carolina, little town north of Raleigh-Durham. And my father's from Greensboro.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and he didn't fall in love with her so much as she said he looked good in a baseball uniform. And she walked up to him and told him that, and everything ensued from there. I have 10 brothers and sisters. I'm number 9 of 11 children.
Wow.
Because they thought they were still on a farm, I guess. But Boston is it's a major metropolitan city. But I grew up in a little neighborhood called Roxbury, Roxbury. And if you're not from New England and ever been up there, there's a lot of rocks, you know, in the area I was born in. And that's where they got his name from. Yeah. And so, but a lot of other people know about Roxbury because that's where New Edition is from. Are you familiar with New Edition, Kelly?
The band?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, she was a big fan, I bet you.
You know what? I actually, if my friend Maisha happens to be watching this on Facebook, we actually made up a dance to that one of their songs for dance class in 1985.
Well, prove it, Kelly.
No, you don't want to see that.
Come on.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to say one line and you say the next line. If it isn't love, why does it hurt so bad?
I don't remember.
Oh, Kelly.
I don't remember the moves either.
You're a real suspect, Kelly.
It's only been, what is that, 40 years ago?
Okay, all right. I'll let you off. So, yeah, New Edition is the most famous. I think Marky Mark and Mark Wahlberg, they're all from the same city, but we didn't mix neighborhoods when I was growing up. Boston was known as a racist town for a reason, but it's gotten much better. We had a mayor named Mayor Menino. He was there for 4 terms like FDR, and he literally treated the neighborhoods the same for the first time between any Italian or Irish mayor. So he really changed the city's racial climate, and it's just a better town. I've been there recently, and I find it to be very welcoming. And so and we have a Chinese mayor right now, Mayor Michelle Wu. She's doing a great job. So so that's my hometown, and I went to school at Tuskegee University, studied plant and soil sciences out of a social agenda. I wanted to kind of do a Peace Corps thing or something in Africa. But Tuskegee doesn't really prepare you to grow food that much anymore. They prepare you to work for Monsanto, ConAgra, or Archer Daniel Midland. So, I didn't stay there long. I stayed for like a year, and then I did some bumping around some other schools. I ended up at Clemson University studying agriculture economics as a non-traditional student in 1996. And that's where I learned a lot about food policy, which I'm looking forward to talking to you about. And then, but then I only stayed there a year because also on the same track to work for the USDA or Natural Resource Conservation Service, something like that. So I just dropped out of school altogether, and I met and worked with a gentleman named Dr. Bob Randall in Houston, Texas, where he founded a group called Urban Harvest. And I don't know if you're a Christian Bible knowing person, Kelly, but there's a story about a guy named Saul.
Phil would know.
He was, Saul, Phil. So Saul was walking on the road to Damascus,
right?
And a blinding light convinced him that he should stop persecuting Christians and become a proponent of this new weird religion out of Galilee. And he became.
God spoke to him right there and converted him on the spot and changed his name.
And he became Paul. So
right.
So I stopped thinking about industrial agriculture in 1996 and began thinking about urban agriculture, And so once I learned that you could grow food without all the inputs of industrial agriculture, that regular people could just compost things that they find no longer useful and grow, I just said, well, damn, this is better than Peace Corps. This is something that I could do any community, anywhere. And ever since then, I've been on this journey of feeding people, not as a relief, but empowering them with what's called, Dr. Randall taught me something called horticultural literacy, where people should know how to read, write, and then they should know PKK, which is the three main ingredients that all plants need. So that's what I've been doing since 1996. And I'd be happy to talk about more things when we get into the conversation.
Wow, yeah, I've got some of the photos and stuff you sent me. So, okay, Rebecca, it's great to see you again. Been about 2 years. I'm so glad. I was so happy to see you running again.
Yeah, that I ran in 24 for U.S. Senate, and then ended up doing halfway decent for a third-party candidate in Minnesota. Came out of the race with just under 2% of the statewide vote. But I have a farm, you were talking about having 11 kids because you grew up on a farm. I kind of chuckled because we actually have 12, but I don't know, it just kind of worked out that way. Not that we were trying, it just, anyways. So we raise our family on a farm. I'm a, mom, we homeschool our kids. And in the summertime, this is what I do. Local foods, farmers market. I've been involved in our local farmers market since 2013. I think I've been on the board since 2015. So, that's in northern Minnesota. We're just shy of the Canadian border, which means that our growing season is very short and it's not particularly warm most of the year. So when it is, it's just kind of this mad rush to get everything done. And, campaign season and running for office just is a complete conflict, no matter how you try to shake that out. So I wasn't, this is what I want to do, is like, I want to be on the farm. We have dairy cows. I don't know if you can hear my pigs in the background because my windows are open. And we raise hogs and sheep. I have garden space, greenhouses, because to really do well to grow anything up here, you really have to have high tunnels, something to make the season a little longer. Mm-hmm. And then the war in Iran started. And for me, that pretty much, like, I woke up that morning and like I had text messages, 5 a.m. People were already texting me that we had started bombing Iran. And I knew it was like, all right, I got to run again. And because I ran in 2024 on an anti-war platform, pro-human anti-war platform, because I'm an Iraq war veteran also. I served 2 tours to Iraq in Ramadi and Baghdad from '04. I was in the Army for a total of 7 years, but in Iraq from '04 to '07. And if you know your history of the war, there was a lot going on at that time, and I did all that as a combat medic. So I know exactly what like our American foreign policy looks like on the ground. So that was what really, people need to hear that kind of a message, especially when we're making the same old mistakes that we made during my time. Only now I have kids old enough, and like joining the military is just kind of in our blood. That's where I met my husband. That's how I ended up in Minnesota, because I'm actually originally from New Orleans. So
Oh, wow.
It's a little bit of a, cultural jump moving this far north.
Right.
Yeah. So, just like all of that. But this is, the food stuff, like you're talking about, like the local food, the farming. The reason I got into this in the first place was really, I think genetically it's just kind of in my blood, but also coming out of Iraq, there was a lot of, I was looking for a way to find some peace, and I could find that in a garden where I couldn't find that other places, like making something, growing something, cultivating something that, is just kind of brings people together. And a good fresh tomato will always do that, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, so like, this is just what I want to do. And then I realized once I got into it, how restrictive agriculture laws actually are, especially dairy, which was exactly what I wanted to do. And so in Minnesota, I've been working to change dairy laws. I have rewritten or written a bill to make the sale of raw milk legal, and to be able to, we can already sell raw milk, but we can't make it into anything and sell that, so my bill would take raw milk, and you'd be able to make it into cheese and yogurt, ice cream, whatever it is. But then to be able to sell that on like a cottage food kind of a level would be legal. And so we're in I think this is the third or fourth year that I have, legislation kind of in the background going to help with the raw milk stuff. And I kind of joke sometimes, like, if I ever get this law passed, I might just step out of politics completely, because this is really this is what I want to do,
It'd be a huge win.
Yeah, that would be a huge, that would change the front of local foods in Minnesota substantially, like for generations, if we were able to get this single law changed. So that's one of the things I've been working on, and there's others too, but this is like this kind of thing is I think the most important thing, because I think it was named it right now escapes me, but politically, who controls the food controls the people, and so by taking the power of being able to grow our own food and make it for our neighbors and then turn around and sell it because you have people that want your product that you make, takes the power of us being able to be independent. So that's, kind of just a little bit about me in a nutshell, but.
Yeah. And if you have not seen or heard Rebecca's speech at the Libertarian Convention, I highly recommend you go and listen to it. It's a little tough. But you tell your experience, and I think it's important for people to know what really happens on the ground, right? So that was very powerful. So Cubby, do you do any dairy stuff, or do you have chickens, or yours is mainly just vegetables? You're doing urban garden.
I don't do dairy, unless you count goat milk. I don't have chickens myself, but my colleagues do. So my let's just call it a sub industry, subsector of conventional agriculture or rural agriculture. Urban agriculture has a lot of very nuanced, particular situations to it, right? But I would love to pick up on Rebecca's issue of policy, because I'm really, honestly, more a policy advocate and food system planner than I am a farmer, to be honest with you. I consider myself very much an amateur farmer, but I know a lot about how to make a better environment for others to grow food.
One of the things that Rebecca mentioned was legal restrictions on all the regulations, and it made me think about your situation, Cubby, with urban agriculture. I know that a lot of towns, a lot of cities, you can't collect your own rainwater. That's something that would affect urban gardening too, right? Have you run into that at all?
Yeah. Well, let me just do a bigger picture real quick. It'll just take like a minute and a half. So the big picture is, as a civic leader, I became very, very knowledgeable about zoning and city planning in general, because a lot of the variances for zoning or liquor license, they all came before me as a representative of civic groups. In Atlanta, there are neighborhood associations, but they also have this system called neighborhood planning units, which are super neighborhoods. They're a cluster of neighborhoods that have an elected representative, and they meet once a month and they vet things before they go to city council. It's a very cool system. It was set up by Maynard Jackson when he was mayor, the first Black mayor of Atlanta. So it's this sort of pro forma way for citizens to have input into City Hall without having to protest every little thing that goes wrong. They can catch it at the nip it in the butt. So, but what I would like to say about what a lot of people may not be aware of from a macro point of view around municipal policies, as cities became a thing, rural areas were displaced, of course, right? Sort of pushed outside. But so when zoning laws came in to try to control how things developed in the city, the sort of policy construct is, if it isn't in the zoning law as an allowed use, like residential or commercial or what have you, or industrial, then it's by definition illegal to do it if it's not named by the ordinance. So because agriculture was presumed in the expansion of the American civilization to happen out in the country, nobody ever thought to put agriculture in the zoning code in many cities, right? So any type of agricultural use could potentially be claimed as a nuisance by your neighbor, and they file a complaint against you, and you could be displaced from that use, either fined or told not to do it by the powers that be. So when you ask a particular question about water, it's really of the whole thing, not just water. Like, so when you were talking about having chickens, that we had to create a movement to get chickens as an allowed creature to have in neighborhoods, because
there wasn't any threshold before that. Even like you could have 4 hens and not a rooster. None of that sort of thing.
No.
Wow.
No. So it all depends on how. It all depends on how urban your city is. So Atlanta wanted to be the new of the South. It was trying to show off how developed it was. So it didn't want any kind of country stuff going on in the city. So it was just not in the code. So we had to get it in the code, and then of course you have setbacks, right? So you can't have the chickens so close to your neighbors. If you happen to have a rooster as part of your operation, it can't be sort of irritating your neighbors who have to go to work in the morning. So all this stuff had to be negotiated with city council and the mayor before we got to have chickens. So we can't have chickens in Atlanta now, but that's very recent, like in the past 10 years. And so when Rebecca's talking about policy around milk, we had to do it for everything related to agriculture. The only thing that we could have done is have a backyard garden. Everybody can do that. But anything that was out of the ordinary, we had to get allowed. So yes, water is a problem because they claim that if you catch water and it goes into the water processing system of the city, that's a cost that has to be addressed. And so therefore you have to pay to catch water because the city has to process it once it goes down the drain. So, these are things we had to fix. And then, even having a water meter and paying the same price as potable water that comes out of the faucet, we had to get a lower I think it's called millage, whatever it's called. That rate that you pay is lower if you have a meter that comes from the city that's for agriculture. That's all new.
Wow. I wonder what you guys think about. Do you remember, I guess it was in 2024, maybe 2023, there was like a raid on an Amish farm, or maybe multiple in Pennsylvania?
Yeah. We've had them in Wisconsin too.
Okay, I just wonder what you think about that, because, and this may be where Greens and Libertarians diverge, but I mean, how do you deal with that kind of thing? Because, I mean, they're trying to keep things safe, but at the same time, I mean, I guess, I guess I probably know what the
Well,
libertarians think.
it's one of those things where the data doesn't show that raw milk is a danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. And if there's a beautiful book, I bet you Rebecca's read it, called The History of Milk. It's a big fat book, but it starts with urban dairies on the East Coast and how filthy they were, the legislation that came from that in New York State and Philadelphia, and how some of that stuff is still on the books regulating milk production, which is absolutely, it wasn't even relevant then for, farmers. It was only relevant to the urban dairy production. And now that stigma is still promoted by the government, which is at the behest of big dairy, which is just as big as any other big pharma, big military equipment, big whatever. The big dairy is a thing too.
Well, it seems like they just don't want the competition, but I mean,
they want control.
Well, the problem is that in Minnesota, the result of all of these regulations has been that they have overregulated dairy farms out of existence. There's only one left in the entire northern half of the state. And so, there's just, doing like farmers market stuff, these kinds of things. We don't have anybody that does dairy. And I looked into trying to see what it would take for me to get things up off the ground. I had dairy cows and I wanted to make cheese, take the farmer's market. And you got to go through the same process as corporate dairy farmers do. The big ones that might have 500 cows, you have to go through the same regulatory process that they do. But it's actually more complicated for small dairies because while like having the cows and milking, so you have your bulk tank, you have like certain regulations about not being able to go directly from the cows into, another. So there's like, certain things that by itself isn't too bad, especially if you're looking at only like 8 to 10 cows, which is what I was doing. I mean, I have 4 cows right now. I have 2 in milk, one that's dry and one that's not quite old enough, right? So I was looking at a small scale, and to be able to milk my own cows and then turn it into a product, not only do I have to have a certified dairy from the state, but then I also have to have a certified kitchen by the state.
Yeah.
Which is a substantial financial burden for being able to make something, and because they consider it commercial. On the side, what I do for farmers market, I have like a farm bakery, and I can do that kind of stuff as because it's considered cottage food. So I don't have to like use a certified kitchen or a commercial kitchen to be able to make bread and take it to the farmer's market or, the things that I make. But for cheese and yogurt or any of that kind of stuff, you would have to have a certified kitchen. We were looking at a financial investment. I would say at this point, and this was before the price increases that started around 2020. But right now it's probably between $500,000, $800,000 easy is what that financial investment would be.
Wow.
Just to be able to take cheese to a farmer's market. And so like, who's going to make that kind of a financial commitment when the burden of the debt falls on you, which is so heavy,
Mm-hmm.
It's just a huge barrier to entry into that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, if the laws changed to be able to have it more in a cottage food level, which would say, you're not considered commercial because you don't create enough of a product to be considered commercial. That would make it so that you could use your home kitchen to be able to make a food product, dairy food product, and then turn around and be able to sell it. So you can use what's already in your kitchen. There's just certain things you have to do that are already common sense, like, keep certain things clean. And, really that's what it comes down to. Just be clean, so things clean. And, really that's what it comes down to.
Sorry.
Just be clean,
Right. I want to jump to, if you don't mind, was when I first talked to Cubby, I said, let me share the right tab here. I was like, have you heard of edible schoolyard? Because it was something that when my daughters were young, they were at a charter school. I wanted to start just a little garden at the school. Unfortunately, at the time, this is like, I don't know, 12 years ago at least, there just wasn't interest in it, sadly. There was like one other parent that came to the meeting. But anyway, I asked Cubby, and he's like, oh, yes, I built one of those. So here's the site. And I know you homeschool too, Rebecca. So I just, when I see, and I loved all the photos that you had, Cubby, where you're showing kids like, teenagers involved in doing this. And then for the younger kids, like it said in that clip, like they're learning science and math and even everything, getting their hands on stuff. And I just think that's so cool. And I wish we could do more of that in more schools. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, or would you rather jump into, I've got the PDF pulled up here too of your wait a minute, NA, what is it? Hold on. Here we go. Whatever you want to get into next.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I just, it's such a lonely journey often to innovate in this space. It's not usually financially rewarding. And if it even if it is somehow, it's just not something that the masses tend to buy into. So I want to always acknowledge people who innovate, because at least we can do, right? So the edible schoolyard concept was sort of codified by a woman named Alice Waters. She's a chef.
Yep. And
she's in Berkeley, California. And it's really a lot of different things, but the thing that makes it magical from the aspect of sustainability is because she sort of pioneered the integration of educational outcomes into the design and the operation of school gardens. Now, if you say it like that, it sounds obvious, right? But not only just with school gardens, but any type of garden, agriculture activity, typically in neighborhoods that are under-resourced, it can oftentimes be in absence for relevancy to what's important to that community. Ironically, it's just a weird feature of colonialism, because America is a colony, right? So it thinks in terms of colonizing things, and even good, well-meaning nonprofits often colonize neighborhoods with gardens instead of asking the community if they want it, making it useful to the particular cultural food patterns and economic dynamics of that neighborhood. I've just seen these gardens get stuck in the neighborhood. They wonder why people steal the trees or not come to the meetings, because it doesn't belong to the community. So Alice was really great at recognizing that schools are there to educate children. So if your garden isn't reinforcing their core mission, it's really irrelevant to the principle. So the holding of curriculum as a reinforcing value for why the garden is there is the magic of edible schoolyards for me. But she also created a branding standard that you had to meet to get on her portal. And once you're on this Edible Schoolyard National Registry, you get, people say, oh, that's important because Alice Waters has done some important work. So that was our goal, to give the school it was a charter school that my son was attending where we installed the garden. Our goal was to get in a position to be able to attract additional funding by being recognized as meeting this standard. And it's not a high standard. It's just making sure that the garden works with the school's curriculum. So we ended up persuading the teacher, the principal, to utilize, and hopefully I get this right, Title IV money or Title VI, one of those numbers, is money that's available for most public schools to do continuing education for their teachers. We were able to redirect that money, because it was a charter school, to hire one of our interns as a garden educator. So the garden didn't just have to depend on teachers who were already overworked. There was a new staff person added to the roles to focus specifically on students using the garden. And then we got the principal to let every student in the school use one of their weekly PE classes to come to the garden instead of jumping rope or whatever. So that was how that garden was more useful. And then the last piece is that the teachers are often food insecure. So the teachers took home most of the produce, ironically. And then we couldn't put the food into the cafeteria because the reason why charter schools mostly exist is for private corporations to make money off of the food service. So we ended up doing chef demonstrations of the produce, which was not threatening to Cisco or whoever provided the reheated food. You know, they don't cook food in schools much anymore. They just reheat nuggets, right? So we were able to take the food that the children were involved in growing. They said, that's my tomato, that's my carrot. And then the chef made it into food, which is another problem. People don't spend a lot of time in their kitchens anymore because they don't have time and they lost the skills. And so you got to reinforce culinary skills. You got to reinforce choosing fresh food, and you have to reinforce the children's willingness to eat it. If they eat it, the parents have to eat it because the parents do whatever children say in this generation, right? It's the other way around. And so these are all the ways in which the edible schoolyard is magical. If you do it with this kind of perspective in mind, then you have a useful asset to the school rather than something that grows weeds and nobody pays attention to.
That's fantastic.
How do you feel about, obviously, Rebecca, you homeschool your kids. Is that part of, it must be part of your science education, right?
Yeah, it's not like I sit down and I work into our science curriculum, feeding the cows every morning, but because it's just kind of what you have to do, So I have 4 kids that I've trained how to milk cows. So if there's something going on and, like campaign wise, and I can't be there in the morning, I do have enough kids at this point that know how to milk the cows that I can just be like, hey, you guys are in charge this morning. I need you to just go and, do this. And my 13-year-old son, he's great because every morning he's out there, refilling stock tanks with water, feeding the pigs, doing all this stuff. He knows how to drive the skid steer. He knows how to drive the farm truck, to get it to where it needs to go. And, those are things that we've taught him how to do because that's what we need him to know so that he can help us with the farm chores, and this all kind of like for us, because I didn't grow up on a farm. And so this was all, there's been such a disconnect in the generations from, working on the land and knowing how to do things that you used to just pass down to your kids by working alongside with them. And then they would learn how to do those things because they were doing it with you, through their childhood. And then when they were adults, then they also grew their own food and, milk their own cows or whatever. But my husband and I didn't, nobody was like teaching us to do that. So like, this has all been just a lot of trial and error. And a lot of times you don't know what you don't know until it's like all of a sudden you have an emergency and you got to figure it out. And so we, but also it's a lot of work. So the kids help because they're benefiting from, what we're providing from the farm. And so they're expected to help us with what we're doing. But a lot of the, just like teaching them how to do the stuff helps me so that I don't have to break it down every, day that we're doing this and like explain it out. I just teach them how to do it and just give them space to go do it on their own. And they don't always get it right, but that's why I'm the adult, and I help oversee it, So, but that's also a learning opportunity. But giving them the responsibility to just say, hey, this is what you're in charge of and you're responsible for this. And this is the expectation. This is the standard. And then allowing them space to go do it, So, we didn't actively seek out that, I don't think that was a conscious effort. It's just the nature of the, environment that we're raising our family. And so it is how it worked out though. So.
That's very cool. I'd like to hear more about your campaigns. I think might be time to ask some questions about that. But before we do that, oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead, Phil. No, I do want to make sure Cubby has a chance, but we can go over a little bit. It's fine. I want to make sure he has a chance to show.
Okay,
We've got
I just
some
wanted
other
to point
stuff.
out that although you two are running on vastly different parties and different platforms, you're both running into a lot of the same thing that I'm guessing informs the rest of your politics, right? When you try to do what you're both doing, you run into a lot of government interference, and you can easily trace it back to who is actually paying our politicians, right? They're not loyal to us and to their voters. They're paid by much larger interests, corporate interests, lobbyists, etc., to do their bidding and then lie to us about it and make us feel like they're doing what we want them to do. And so I'm guessing, and when we get to that point where we're talking about your campaigns, that your involvement in agriculture, whether urban or rural, leads you to then start realizing all the other ways that government is not doing the will of the people, but rather the will of other entities.
So if I could, Phil, before we, I really like to try on other shoes before I take the ones that are most comfortable. And I think as contrarian people, it's more comfortable to sort of pick out what's happening for the evil or wrong reasons. But I actually learned a lot at Clemson in 1 year. In my Ag Econ 101 class, I actually learned that American food policy is benevolent ignorance at the core. Because so if you just buy this for a second, so around the early 1900s, so you had three major activities or events. You had the Dust Bowl, you had the Great Depression, and then you had the communists, the Red Scare. And I think, as I understand it from my professor, there was initially a really sort of pre-FDR impetus, and then FDR carried it forward to really do several things with American food policy macro-wise, was to stuff Americans with as much calories as at the least cost as possible to address all three of those issues, So the hunger from the Great Depression was about potatoes for everybody. It's just, as much as you can produce, farmers, to the point that you destroy the soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And don't let it rest. So that was not the goal, to destroy the soil. The goal was to keep Americans from looking at communism favorably because they were just so hungry. So it's really a benevolent, ill thought out policy. And then when they came back and tried to address it with the USDA programs to pay farmers not to grow, we grew up with this, myth that farmers were paid not to grow food. That people would say, how crazy is that? But the truth is they were paid to rest their land, and trying to deal with the Dust Bowl, right? And then the last communist piece is just obvious, let's just pacify the people with a food system that keeps you full of calories to the expense of your health, because it's not a nutrition focused food system. But all these things were intended to do something reasonably logical from a sort of government perspective. They metastasize into the evil that we now see with corporations in control of the benefit of these policies, because the family farms disappeared, and then the agriculture, we call it agriculture of the middle, where most food was grown within 200 to 300 miles. Now it's grown, hundreds of miles. And that transportation of the food, the processing of it, the storage of it, all this became a petrochemical dependent food system, including the fertilizer. So now we have to invade Iraq and bomb Iran because our food system is required to have cheap oil as the main input. Mm-hmm. So it's just all this sort of conflagration. So when we now in 2026, it's not enough to say Monsanto's bad or ConAgra is bad. It's like, how can we refit the food system from its sort of reasonable intentions and focus on nutrition, focus on reasonable wages for the workers, so they don't have to, take bowel movements in the field and cause E. coli breakouts because the owners of the farms don't have enough latitude to allow them to go to the restroom in a proper break, right? There's all these systemic issues that are policy based, but nobody knows what the policy should be, who's in power. So we have a responsibility as a movement. I'm getting to the politics. When we're running for office, it's not just to get into office and raise hell. We have to get in there and become mechanics and fix the machinery of the policy, and correct it, not with the perspective that you were trying to kill us. The idea is that you killed us incidentally with these other goals that are reasonable. How can we achieve those same goals by protecting the environment, protecting labor, protecting food should cost what it costs to produce it, and it's going to be a lot more expensive than it is now. So how does everybody eat in a food system where the cost of food is accurate to the labor, the environmental costs, and all these things that are being displaced onto public coffers because the corporations aren't required to clean stuff up from CAFO farm operations, stuff like that. So it's complicated, right? But we're trying to be. I think the difference between me and Rebecca, if you allow me to say, being actual farmers and then going, it's pretty much like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Like, we're going there with an experience of the land, not a romanticism of the land. Like, we want policy that makes life better for us, and by dint, it will be better for all farmers, right? So that's how I think about it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I appreciate your optimism. Let's just put it that way.
Well, Rebecca, do you want to jump in about any of that?
Sure. So here's to add to, like he's talking about, like the situation's complex. Because where I live in the country, I live rurally, like we have more cows than people around where we are. And, during hay season, which is now, like the fields are just full of hay bales. And there's not a lot of people, like you have I think we have, it's one person per square mile, or like, I think that's what the population density is where I live. So not a lot, However, even though I live in a very rural area where there is a lot of cows, there's a lot of hay being made, like there's fields of corn, soybeans, wheat, all of that kind of stuff. We still live in a food desert because we don't have access. People don't have regular access to, you have to drive to get to a grocery store. You have to drive to get to anything. So there's like the closest grocery store to me would take about 20 minutes to get there, which isn't far compared to where, how far like other people have to drive around out here. So the answer to food security and food accessibility is really this, like your microclimate basically, and like having, a smaller, your network is being closer so that you have more accessibility, farmers markets, that kind of stuff. But then again, even in wintertime is very long. And so you can't grow things here. You can't grow things all year round, really, unless you have a lot of infrastructure to be able to make it happen. Because even in the middle of winter, we get 6 hours of sunlight a day, sometimes less.
Oh, wow.
So like at the peak of winter, our shortest days are very short, so, and it's not even good sunlight because of how far north we are, it's never direct. So, however, also in addition to that, the average age of the farmer is pushing 60, so what you have is a top-down system, not a bottom-up system. We have a food system that is dependent on these big farms where the average age of the farmer is very high. But if you want to be able to get into farming to any degree, the land, you can't find land. The land you can find is insanely expensive. It needs a lot of work around here. So a little bit of background for us. My husband's family is from here. There's like 5 generations of his family that are from this town in northern Minnesota, like predates even the Civil War, that kind of stuff. Like they've been here for a long time. And his family had a farm. That's just kind of what people did back then. You went west, you got a farm, and you provided for yourself. So his family, he was in the Army also, and when he got out of the Army, they were like, hey, if you move home, we'll just give you this like parcel of land. And so we moved to Minnesota. But we have 6 acres. It was all woods. Like there was like nothing was open about this. Nothing was usable. Everything that we did here, we had to clear the woods ourselves.
Wow.
Every tree, every space that we have on our property was taken down by us, which is a lot of, that is so much work. That is so much work. But also what that does when you're clearing land that was formerly woods is that it destroys the soil. You can't get around that when you're taking down trees to make space for gardens, that kind of stuff. Pulling the roots and the trunks of the base of the tree out, it just destroys the topsoil. And so that has taken us a lot of time and a lot of work to be able to make the soil healthy again, to just be able to grow well in it. You could bring in dirt, but it's very expensive. And that just the financial burden, again, it's always the financial burden of this is a lot. So, the average age of the farmers, very high. Younger farmers trying to get in is financially just, it's a financial burden that most people won't even take on because the stress is too much. And that the suicide rate of farmers is actually higher than veterans. I don't know if y'all do that.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
So there's a reason for that, because you have one bad crop, you have all this debt, you have the bank still wants its bills paid. And this is a high risk job. You have one big storm, 1 year of drought, something happens and you can't pay your bills, So I don't necessarily know. I'm not sure there's a good answer to that because you can't fight nature. But at the same time, understanding what the reality is that, what we're facing as a nation and as a community of where we get our food from and our accessibility, what we're looking at 20 years from now is going to be even harder than this if something doesn't change.
If I could jump in and follow Rebecca's train of conversation. So, I think anybody who knows the issues involved usually come at this conversation extremely humble because nobody knows how to make it happen, right? I think that's what she just said, and it's true. No one knows. And no professor, no economist, and certainly no farmer, right? Most farmers have so much respect for the variables in farming that they just don't even speak about this stuff. It's like, because if you open your mouth, you're saying something you're not sure of. What I am going to take a chance and say is that most problems in the world are design problems, not resource problems.
Right.
Like, for instance, hunger itself. There's plenty of food on the planet. It's distribution, logistics, even in Somalia and Ethiopia. It's just that the food is there. It just can't get to where the people are because of war or whatever, So the problem in America is solvable because we have so much resources, so much capital, so much ingenuity, so much can-do spirit. The problem is politics. So, we need to reinvent part of how we have infrastructure. She said infrastructure on the farm, but I'm more concerned about the infrastructure between the farms. It's the farm roads, it's the silos, it's all the things that we have moved from being close to farms, and we moved it to where it's convenient for ADM to be the dominant person, entity in control of most food on the planet. It's an aggregation of the food system infrastructure to be convenient for corporations to maximize profit, and not for the logistics of how food can get to people in the most nutritious and fresh way possible. It's always going to be less than 200 miles. So if you get your food from what's called local, it's less than 300 to 200 miles. And for that to happen, you have to have a slaughterhouse for the cows and the chickens and the goats that's within those mileages for the farms who are doing that kind of production. And that's not the case anymore. It's all one place. It has to travel bunches of miles, and then it has to be, stored with refrigeration, all the stuff that I listed earlier, right? So I think one step towards I don't call it a solution, I call it a re-civilization. Like, The current civilization we have is dependent upon oil. The whole lifestyle we have is dependent upon inexpensive oil. That's a civilization that's dying because of peak oil. If you believe that, if you don't, it's just happening because people are not going to let you keep walking into the Middle East anymore and just take their oil. So, we need a civilization built on some other kind of foundation. And I think the easiest one is proximity. We have plenty of space in the United States. So if we can move the infrastructure, at least I say 20% of it, back to the middle of where farms are, then we can close a lot of the need for external energy. And we can close a lot of the need for a bunch of, logistics. And so even that one step, it just takes courage, to force things to happen. Like the NIMBY factor is a big problem. Nobody wants, pig waste in their back anywhere near them, right? So we have to force pig waste to go somewhere, and manage it properly. And if we can do that, then we can grow pigs closer to where people like to eat pork, instead of just all in North Carolina. So these are the things I think that are doable. And Mr. Phil, he kind of like impugned that, these things are almost impossible in American politics. I don't think they are, because we still have enough vestige of democracy to do peripheral changes that nobody's paying attention to. That's why third parties are so important, because we can go after policy fringes that the corporations think are not important, but we can just do essentially what the military calls a flanking maneuver, and get some of this stuff that's low-hanging fruit done, and then keep building momentum. But we have to educate our electorate. They're not going to do the right thing in terms of putting the right people in office without political education. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, is a mass movement that's contingent upon educated voters. And it sounds like a big job, but it starts with school boards. And the Tea Party proved that that's doable. And MAGA has proved that you don't have to have education to vote the way you should, So I just think that it's something we can't do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think having a garden in your backyard is certainly a start. Not everyone, or a few people maybe, can do what Rebecca is doing. And I mean,
especially where she's
doing it. But I think, to your point about the schools, I think really that's kind of where it starts, right? And in urban communities, people can maybe start, and you reach kids young and get them interested. I mean, we know that a lot of kids don't even want to eat vegetables, but like if you get a tomato right out of the garden, it's very different than something that sat on the shelf forever. So maybe that's where we start, and at least have more of growing like produce. Maybe
it's not the growing, Kelly. It's the consumer behavior that we're going after with children. I just got to be frank with you, because there's no reason not to be frank, right? This is an alternative media source. It's not going to happen with community gardens. The scale is not there. It's not going to happen with urban farms. It's going to happen with consumer behavior. Consumer behavior is policy from the ground up. So if children, in a school garden, learn to only purchase hyper local or really true tomatoes, because a lot of tomatoes in the store are not real tomatoes. If they learn that much, and then they go out and won't allow their spouse, who they marry, to buy fake tomatoes, and the whole household conspires to support Rebecca and her farm, then we're making real change, that scale, because the consumer behavior will push up corporate change through the whole food chain. And then if we do the policy coming down, and then the farmers in the middle, because Rebecca said that it's too expensive to become a farmer, right? So we have to actually remove the cost of the land by doing land trust and land conservations, and give the land to young farmers, because that's the only way they're going to get it. They're not going to be able to purchase land. So we're going to have to do farming cooperatives, and then buy the land with like grant money, and then give it to them, or make it accessible at a reasonable cost. With those three layers of activity, then we can move the needle. But no community garden or no school garden is going to change this food system. It's too much of a monster. But these things working in concert, because agriculture is the second biggest industry in the country, only second to the military-industrial complex. So it's a lot of money involved in it, and they're not going to go quietly into that good night. They're not.
Right. Right.
That we 100% agree on.
Do you want to talk about the North American? This is your here.
I'll talk about it after Rebecca says something else because I have already been talking a lot.
Oh, okay. Okay. Only for this.
I mean, that's just how my mama taught me how to have a conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I had a thought. Now it's like I was listening to you. I was so intent. I wasn't even like taking notes on what I should say next. But I do know, like around here, we have. Okay, so northern Minnesota is a zone 3, and if you understand like the USDA zones, for instance, yeah.
But go ahead.
We used to live in. So my husband got out of the Army in South Carolina. It was Columbia, South Carolina, and there was a zone 7. So you can grow citrus in a zone 8. So the further south you get, the higher the number gets, right? And the closer you get to the North Pole, basically, the lower the number gets. So Minnesota, where we are in our microclimate, is a zone 3, which means that in wintertime, it will occasionally hit 40 below zero, right? So that's what we deal with in the wintertime. But that also means that we have restrictions on, the perennial crops, things that we can grow. Fruit trees we have some apple trees that we can grow, some plum trees. You'll never grow a peach in northern Minnesota without something, kind of protecting it permanently, but one, super cold night's going to kill the whole thing, so you won't be able to grow peaches here. Those are all, everybody that gets peaches here, it's all trucked in, and not, I think you can grow peaches in southern Minnesota, but I honestly don't know. So yeah, like having the distribution, the accessibility, that kind of stuff. And especially we're in our kind of community, because of how far north we are, having the variety is helpful. But the community, I live in an area where it is very much a meat and potatoes kind of a place. If you grow something interesting and fun, the likelihood of being able to sell it is very small. So then you've taken up space in your gardens or whatever for something that's different. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to catch on to the community on how they can cook it, what it tastes like, and incorporate it into their regular diet. So tomatoes are big. Everybody eats tomatoes. I think tomatoes is one of the number one kinds of things that you can grow that sell well. Potatoes is another. And then after that, it just kind of goes down. But knowing what your community around you eats, and then being able to produce a lot of it in a way that, and up here, you have to be able to preserve it, right? Because like I said, you're not gonna be able to grow anything through the winter. But I guess that's my 2 cents on what you were talking about with the, the community and what they want. That's absolutely vital. Knowing what the kinds of things that they're looking for, and then being able to produce it. That's what makes you successful. And I think that's one of the things that we've done right here, is that even though, like, because of our situation, trying to clear it, the land, the trees, and rebuilding the soil. And this is the first year where I've actually been able to like dig into the soil, and I can see a good 6 to 8 inches of black dirt on top, because I've been doing, I take spaces and I plant oats, and then I till them in for green manure, and then I plant more oats and I till it in. And I might get 2 to 3 tillings because of how short our season is. And if there's not a certain, if it's not warm enough, the oats are not going to grow. And before it starts getting too cold to be able to do that. And this is the first, but we've been here since 2013. So this is 13 years is how long it's taken us to go from woods to workable land, really.
Wow.
And that's a long time that a lot of people, if they're going to do this, you need to be able to start making money quickly. And that was actually how our farm bakery kind of got up off the ground, because I recognized that I didn't have the space and the soil wasn't good enough to be able to just start growing things straight out of the ground without a lot of work. And that was how the farm bakery, I am good at baking bread, so then I was like, I started baking bread, and then people liked it, and I started baking more, and it just kind of grew from there. And that's what's kept us going, but just being able to kind of diversify what the farm does. I use our farm products, the milk that we get from our dairy cows in our bread, because it's not considered, that doesn't fall into the raw milk kind of, restrictions, and just, you know, kept going with that. And so it's more of a farm to table kind of experience with making bread. But that just kept growing. The more I baked, the more I sold, and then I just kept trying to bake more and figuring out how to do it faster. And you know, it's called a value added product. And a lot of small family farms, this is how that you survive, is not just by doing you know, row crops, but figuring out how to take what you've grown and make it into something that is worth more on the shelf to people. And then be able to like expand it that way.
So I can just cap it a little bit more, you know, if Rebecca doesn't mind me bumping in. So like the whole idea is that statistically there are no farmers who live off farming.
No, we don't.
So, you know, and it's not just VAP or any type of, like, agritourism is another opportunity, you know, like boarding horses or something like that for rich people. But most farmers have off-farm jobs, you know, like in another whole industry to make it. And so the food insecurity starts on the farm, you know, and she talked about distance to the place, but oftentimes it's just like, who has time to cook when you're working off farm and then still have to farm all night? Because animals need care every day. There's no vacation for animals, you know. And so it just gets to be this sort of peculiar situation where farming makes no goddamn sense, you know.
I regularly, especially in the middle of winter, I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Well, we're milking cows at 30 below. Yeah. Like, why am I doing this?
So most farmers are missionaries of some sort, you know, whether they believe in Jesus or Buddha, they're just missionaries. And so the question is, do we want to care for these people? Because when she's talking about soil building, which is, you know, like, it's a macro problem, is that there's only, you know, this much topsoil on the planet across the whole earth. So it's not just in Minnesota. The whole earth doesn't have enough topsoil to feed, you know, like we're at risk of not having. Topsoil is a very rare commodity. And when you don't care for it, it doesn't come back easily, right? And so that's why urban farming is so appealing to me, because we can do things at micro that is not reasonable to do at macro scale that Rebecca's talking about. Like, for instance, like, we can redirect the waste stream in urban cities to build compost at an intense production value. We can cheaply layer compost across a 5-acre urban farm every season, and it not cost anything more than typical fertilizer. That's only a feature of living in a high dense area, right? So we can do all these sort of creative things that are both technical but also sort of economically viable when we have a conspiracy of innovation, policy support. The policy support in the urban area for market forces are that we have school boards that purchase 40% of their vegetables that go into the cafeterias from hyperlocal farms. With that one contractual commitment, you know, like, for instance, in Atlanta, Emory University has committed to 50% local sourcing for their school, what do you call them? Dining halls. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that one policy commitment from one institution has spawned the first 80. It's a cooperative farm that's being led by an experienced farm couple, intentionally to train 3 next generation farmers, and they're doing it through a cooperative ownership model that's underwritten by the contract from Emory. They use that contract to get the financing from the banks and from the conservation nonprofit that helped them acquire the land. It's all based upon the demand from Emory. So that's what we need. That's what we need: multi-layered policy coordination, along with market-driven contractual commitments, long-term commitments, and then young backs with a lot of muscle. Because at the end of the day, there is no farming without the sacrifice of muscle tissue. You know, it just happens. You know, like I have a sprained thumb right now because I hit a stirrup hole the wrong way, and so this thumb is taking like weeks to heal. And there's no substitution for a hand. I need all 5 thumbs, because that's what makes me like competitive with other animals, is my opposable thumb. So like, it's physical, it takes intelligence, it takes courage, and it takes absolute blind faith to be a farmer. You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I would agree. This doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, we feel the same way, but we've managed to, we raise pork and chickens and eggs and trade that for hay. And there's a lot of cooperation in our area of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. It's almost a tiny food desert, and that we're pretty much 40 minutes from anything. But that's the sort of thing that we have to do. But Rebecca, doesn't sound like you have a ton of neighbors, so that's difficult to do.
No.
And Cubby pointed out that in an urban area, you have lots of neighbors, but you just don't have enough space and the right sort of market forces or government policy at work.
And we have the competition of other development. So we're competing with very lucrative. I'm sorry, Rebecca, I think I stepped on you. Very lucrative other kinds of use of land use, right? Mm-hmm. So the only way you can actually have meaningful acreage in food production in a place like Atlanta that's sucking people from the rest of the country every year is to restrict the land use. Mm-hmm. Boston did a study where 50 acres restricted for urban ag only can feed a certain number of people. They did the numbers. I think Tufts University did it. So if every city municipality who is serious about this balance of having food close to where people live in modern civilization, which is what Europe is doing, like to be a competitive international country, we have to begin to bring food close to where urban density is. And to do that, it has to be visionary mayors and city councils that plot this out and tell developers you can't have this land. And who's going to do that? Well, the developers own the politicians. And that's why the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, and there was a party in New York called the Rent's Too Damn High. That party was really important, and because the rent is too damn high.
Yeah.
So what? I guess I'll ask what. I don't know. Name 3 things you would do if you're elected. Like, what would you like to see implemented? I mean, I guess you just described it as let's get local school boards to agree to purchase vegetables.
And if I could modify your question, Kelly, a little bit,
please
just
do.
One of them about agriculture, because people care about agriculture, and that's why you guys are running. That seems to be your primary focus, but voters will make decisions on other issues too. So if there's other ones that you want to bring in and flesh out more of what your campaign looks like outside.
Yeah, we should do that. I wanted to focus mainly on this issue, but you guys all seen the pledge, and I know you're anti-war and pro-civil liberties and all that, but sure, why don't you?
Campaign's going, yeah.
Yeah.
If Michael was here, that's what he would have asked a while back,
yes.
right? Michael's good about keeping us on track.
He kept coming out. It's okay. It's all right. Right. Before we do that, Cubby, is there anything else you wanted to share about? I had your PDF up here.
I'll do the elevator speech. So
Sure.
I postulated earlier that most things in the world are design challenges. I got that from E.F. Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller was a design expert, right? And then I also read E.F. Schumacher's books, Small is Beautiful, Economics as If People Mattered, when I was a teenager. And it really has governed everything. There's been nothing else I've learned that's better than the idea that most problems in human civilization are scale problems. If things are too big for the average person to understand, much less control, then it inherently becomes oppressive. It's not even, you don't even have to mean to do it. It's just too big. Yeah. And it has a life of its own. So we need to scale down things so that people can understand them, control them, and be a part of them. And so that, to me, is what my company is about. So I don't want to get distracted by why I didn't do a nonprofit. But the reason why I have a problem with nonprofit is because they're not accountable to anything useful. They're only accountable to funders. And so by being a market-driven organization, we're accountable at least to justifying our fees that we charge to our clients. So we're a consulting conglomerate, right? That has people across the country who are operating off the same values and principles of do as little harm as possible. So we don't go into neighborhoods that don't want us there. We don't propose projects that the community doesn't buy into. We don't work with people that are being racist or anything problematic. We just do like service work, right? And we're a public benefit corporation, which by design is the design side of what people are familiar with, like B Corp. People know about that. You get a B Corp certification that says that you meet B Corp corporations' expectations of behavior. But we actually are statutorily designed as a public benefit corporation out of Delaware. So we're responsible for reporting every year to the state of Delaware and to anybody else who's interested how we benefited the public every year. And that measurement is how we justify our profits, right? So North American Food and Farm, PBC, is this corporation that's based upon the work I did in Atlanta for about, 2012 to 2020. That's 8 years, right? Yeah. So 8 years prototype work. We replicating that prototype in other cities that will have us. We started in Birmingham. We went to Tallahassee, went to my hometown of Boston, and we went to Houston because that's where I learned to grow food. And then we went to Denver, and now we're here in Flint, Michigan. And so we come into these cities and we ask, how can we be of service? And we try to not to get in front of anybody who's already been doing it, and we try to push from behind with innovation. And the innovation mostly is policy. You know, we don't just go start planting gardens. We go to the city hall and say, where's your ordinances that support gardens? And we try to fix those first. So make it easier for everybody to grow food. And then one of the other things I'm really proud of is that we don't take all the profits of our contracts. We do this forced delegation of the work. So if we get a contract, we try to take like 20 to 40, 30% of it for us. And then we push the rest down through a network of preferred vendors and contractors and strategic partners so that we can foment a stronger network of food system actors. Because a lot of people may know how to do compost development, but they may not be good at pitching contracts to people. We're really good at that. So we source the work and then we distribute it amongst our friends and colleagues so that we're all stronger together. It sounds like more ministry than business, but it works out because we get big contracts like the Atlanta Housing Authority paid us to put a food system strategy over a HUD subsidized redevelopment plan for former neighborhoods that we used to have projects in them. That was a fat contract that had a lot of fat in it. So we were able to take that money and recompense, you know, for sacrifices that we had made through a lot of sweat equity over the years to proof of concept stuff with community gardens and things like that. So it's a balanced model that we do need investors at some point. We are going to do a non-accredited investor campaign to raise millions of dollars so we can do this across the country and the continent, because it really is North America. We mean Mexico, Canada, and all U.S. territories. But currently, we're doing it through bootstrap work, because if we don't do this work, we'll have a country, we'll have communities that are completely devoid of sovereignty. They have no sense of agency, so their politics will reflect the dependency that's in their stomach. So the movement that we're building is gastric based. If we can get you sovereign in your stomach, then you'll think about voting for the school board that's really educating your children. You'll think about insisting that housing is a human right. It's a natural progression. When you have food that's in your control, you start thinking about all other aspects of civilization that ought to be in your control. So that's my philosophy, is food first, and then everything else that humans need.
Okay, and what's the best place for anybody to go and look that up? You have a website in development, is that right?
We have a website in redevelopment. It's like our fifth iteration. We're trying to make it more of an IP portal, because most of the work we've done, we hadn't had time to report on it. So I'm writing a couple of books right now. We're going to do a lot of like podcasts and webinars and things like that. So people will be able to support us through transactional purchases on this portal. And it's taken a while to get the paywall right and everything. But currently, we've always got most of our clients through our Facebook page. So North American Food and Farm is searchable on Facebook. And there's lots of information and photo albums there of our work. And then you can, of course, reach us at our email, info at the letter N, Apple, F as in Frank, the number 2, pbc.farm. So info at naf2pbc.farm.
Okay, great. Well, do you want to say anything else about why should people in Michigan's 10th district, as Phil was trying to steer me here, why should they vote for you other than agriculture?
Yeah. So, you know, the problem in Michigan is the same problem the rest of the country has. We just have done it, you know, to a more extreme here, which is political negligence, or what does it happen when doctors don't do the right thing? What's that called? Malpractice. So political malpractice. The most extreme case, of course, is the Flint water crisis. It wasn't a problem with water. It was a problem with human integrity, you know. I can't break it down. I don't think we have enough time. And most of it's on the internet anyway. The mechanics of it are, you know, just not crossing T's and dotting I's. You know, they replaced elected officials with these folks called emergency managers. The emergency managers didn't know anything about the water system. They used the wrong strategy to get the water at the cheapest cost to manage budgetary obligations for the city and the county. And then they end up stripping, the protection inside the pipes by not getting the right water formulation. And then the lead got exposed and the copper got exposed and they poisoned children and children died and they keep dying and nobody cares because they're poor Black people mostly and a lot of poor white people. This has been the first city where I've actually fed more white people than Black people because it's just a place where everybody's getting the shaft. Mm-hmm. And GM started it, true. And that's, Michael Moore told that story on Looking for Roger Rabbit. But it's become a national, it's become a statewide habit or a statewide industry to mess over people in Michigan over not doing public policy correctly and not caring about the downstream consequences of your self-serving decisions for politicians who are not in it to serve, but in order to be a stepping stone to something else. And I like Ms. Whitmore, but Gretchen, is it Gretchen? Yeah, Gretchen. But it's a continuation of the same behavior because she has done nothing for the Flint water crisis since she's been in office. And so we have to have not better politicians in Michigan. We need better voters, who vote. No one would let somebody walk up and slap their child in the face and not do something about it. But politicians slap people's children in the face in Michigan every day through policy, but the voters don't act like they care that much about it. And so we need a revolution in Michigan. And it starts with voting for me and other people like me who are not in it because corporations are paying us. We're in it because our children welfare is also at stake. And we're going to serve, like the signs say, and busy, in little streets in the neighborhood say, drive slow like your grandmother lives here. Well, I'm going to serve like my grandmother, is going to be affected by the policy decisions I make. And so I can give you more specific things, but that's generally why people should vote for me. I have integrity, I have competence, and I'm determined to serve no more than 3 terms, because if I don't get it done in 3 terms, what the hell am I doing there?
Yeah. Okay. I just want to I'm going to put this up every time because the non-voters, if people would just believe that you guys can win, it will happen. Agreed. Okay. So Rebecca, do you want to talk? We didn't get into, again, I hope everyone will go and listen to your speech at the Libertarian Convention. So I won't make you retell any of that stuff, but I know you're against war. And is there anything else in particular that, like for any listeners in your community or anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I'm essentially, and I already talked about this, just running on a anti-war pro-human platform. So when, people are asked, well, what does pro-human mean? Just any kind of policy or regulation or anything that restricts or disrespects the individual person or the sovereignty of the person, we have to keep that as like the forefront of everything, right? Because, collective groups don't have rights, individuals do. So when we're looking at people who, respect their rights as individuals, then everything else starts falling into place. And right now we've gone so far from that. Particularly, it's the most obvious with the military industrial complex in Americans' foreign policy, right? And like right now, we can't even, we went to war with Iran and, making the same mistakes we did in Iraq for, weapons of mass destruction didn't exist, but now they're like, oh, well, they were 2 weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. Well, they were 2 weeks away from a nuclear bomb last June too, if I remember, the timeline correctly. So, there's always going to be a reason for the war machine to want to have more war. And so if we want other countries to respect our sovereign borders, we also need to respect theirs, and then that would be, just so when I'm talking about like pro-human, like I'm not even talking about just pro-American human, but like just pro-human in general, because we can't have a policy for our own government to not respect the rights of other individuals in other countries, even if they aren't within our own borders. And I don't, I'm looking for intellectual consistency in that. And, you don't see a lot of that especially not in the federal government, when with their policies and their regulations and their laws and their decision making when it comes to other countries across the world. And, we've seen a lot of that happening, especially in the last 12 months. With the first bombing of Iran last June, the kidnapping of President Maduro, and then now essentially like we're on the border, we're on the edge of having a full-scale war with Iran, and we just lost more troops yesterday, so or the day before. And those people that died in defense of this country, that their lives mattered, and the people that love them are going through the grieving process now. And if we're going to ask that of our troops to sacrifice for something, we need to make sure that it's a righteous cause and they're not dying for nothing, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say pro-human. But like in America First kind of a perspective also is that because looking for a position within the American government, that we need to make sure that we're putting the American people, what we need also at the front of everything. So not taking money from foreign lobbies to make decisions based on what a foreign government wants from us, and I'm a libertarian, right? So like my solutions to things are never going to be, the government is going to provide a solution, because oftentimes you see the government has created a problem, and the same government that creates a problem can't also be the solution to a problem. It's contradictory. So, being able to like put American people, and that includes like the economic, the devaluing of our dollar, the inflation that we've seen in the last years, the printing of extra money, all of those things would be kind of the things that I would particularly take on first, because if our money is worthless, everything else is out of balance too, so those kinds of policies is what I'm talking about when I say like pro-human, and making sure that people that, you're not just being expected to work your whole life and then die, because when we were talking about like having a job off the farm, my husband is a heavy machinery mechanic. He works off the farm. And that means that a lot of the farm stuff is left to me and the kids because he has to have another job, so all we do is work. And my generation, we're looking at never even being able to, there's no chance for retirement. That's never going to happen. It's just, we're going to like just keep going until we just can't go anymore. And then hope that something in the end works out. I don't know, but there's a lot of people in that situation. And so there's a lot of people that are feeling very angry because of the decisions that politicians have made to get us where we are today. And so my intention would be to undo some of those bad decisions and try to make it so that there is more even the possibility of prosperity for the individual in the United States, at all economic levels, like particularly people like at the bottom of the economic food chain, who are always going to be, affected more by decisions because we're already kind of barely holding on, so those are the kinds of things that I would do. That's the kind of person I am. I don't want to be I just want to be on the farm. Like it's like the politics side of this is just a necessary part of the situation because somebody has to do it. Somebody has to stand up and say, okay, this isn't right. And we're going to fix this. And I can help fix this. And so that's kind of how I got into this, is that because I have kids and I want them to have a future, it's not because like you said, like 3 terms and done, like you can't get it. Like, just what are we doing? And at some point you got to decide, because I'm not even sure at this point, it's not clear whether we can actually vote ourselves out of this mess. But I know that if we can, we have to make it so that, there's a possibility that we could. But doing like the third party politics has got to be the answer, because the two major parties, it's just, that's corruption from the top to bottom.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you could just imagine, I mean, this is why we did this. We did candidates for Assange, and that was basically on, free speech, and journalism. But, I see libertarians and Greens as being able to work together. And I know that there are points where you don't agree. We'll get into that. I think we're going to do a panel just on healthcare. That'll be interesting. But, there's so much stuff that you could work together. And I think these panels are a good example of that. And so that's what we're trying to do. And
Well, Kelly, I actually think it's going to be interesting because there's some triangulation possibilities that you don't even have to force. So the more Black people that become Greens are, in my estimation, and this is just anecdotal, it's not scientific, but I think you have a Black person who's a Green 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10 is a libertarian Green. Because many Black people are conservative and are, instinctively libertarian because of race. We don't do the system because it's a myth about the wish for government help. Black people off the plantation and Reconstruction were sovereign-leaning people and independent-leaning people. It was really integration and the New Deal and stuff that got people, the anti-poverty programs that redirected Black instinct. The Black instinct, in my understanding about history, is self-sufficiency and do for self, because you had to. And so I think, when a person takes the risk of leaving the Democratic Party, it's very risky for Black people. The Democratic Party has a mafia-like hold on the Black vote.
Yes.
So when you
heard Trump. Yeah.
Yes. So when you get a Black, electorate that moves to something alternative, they're going to bring their whole selves. And so I would call myself a libertarian Green, because I come from sharecroppers, and I know them. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Continue, Cubby. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
It's okay. I'm almost finished. So it's just the idea that we can think that it's something that needs to be persuaded, but oftentimes it's something that needs to be revealed. If you get people to bring their whole selves and you listen to individual voters, I love Rebecca's instinct around the human-focused politics. Humans are whole creatures with all types of influence, all types of instincts, all types of traditions, all types of heritage. And I think the full person that grew up in this space is not a person that wants government, not a real American. The real American wants freedom. That's the instinct of all of us. And so when you get a chance to be your true self, and you're not forced to be a puppet by a puppeteer party, then you get to be about freedom. And freedom is about openness and not government. I think government has to fix this problem. I disagree with a little bit with Rebecca when she said, something that created the problem can't fix it. That's not true. We fix a lot of problems that we created. Like an individual, you drive your car till there's not enough oil. Well, you go get the oil change, or you get the engine block corrected. But I think that government has to fix some of the stuff it did. But once it does that, then it needs to get out of the way. I guess I'm a protracted libertarian. I do think there's some stuff that has to be fixed. Yeah.
Well, isn't it that, Greens want, what I see is Greens want government to come in and do some things, but they don't want to relinquish control of it.
That's correct.
So yeah. And we have
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know if you know Michael Dublin here in North Carolina. He's running for Senate now. And he talks a lot about what you just said about, as a Black person leaving, especially in the South, leaving the Democratic Party. He hears it a lot. But go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I ran in 2024, the goal of my campaign was to pull people together from outside of the Libertarian Party in realization of what the common problems are. So people, Greens and Libertarians and other small parties, I think, understand what the problem is. The problem is unaccountable government, dysfunctional government. To what degree we can disagree, but none of us have a chance. And this is one of the reasons this podcast is so valuable. None of us have a chance until we understand each other and have a seat at the table. And if any independent candidate, Libertarian candidate, Green candidate can make it into Congress, we'll get more of them in state houses. then there can be conversations about, okay, we've identified the problem. We
Yeah.
disagree on the solution, but at least we have an opportunity to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
would love to have Greens and Libertarians in Congress and debate healthcare. One side might want single payer, the other side might want free market, but that conversation is all captured right now by the insurance industry,
Yep.
which both big parties are paid for or paid by, right?
Yeah.
So on all these issues, we need to recognize that we have a common, I won't use the word enemy. That sounds kind of, well, for me, it's an enemy because I'm a little bit
Why not?
shady,
Malcolm X used that word.
Yeah, I know he did. Yeah, and I feel that way because, anyway, you get my point. I just want to ask one more question, then I'm probably going to shut up, or maybe not.
No.
Kelly knows me, I won't. But I have a question.
No, please.
In my opinion, the biggest negative event to happen to the American people in its history, and this includes wars, I would say, is how the United States government in the late 60s and 70s took science that they knew was flawed, created an absolutely terrible policy, not only for nutrition, the old food pyramid, which was basically poisonous, took over farming in the early 70s. Earl Butz was the Secretary of Agriculture under Nixon, promoted family farms and corn subsidies, which in essence, corn subsidies help poison poor people with taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And that is hundreds of millions of people died early, died of heart issues, blood sugar issues, diabetes, whatever, because of that. So I'll nod to Cubby and say maybe it was negligence or ignorance or whatever. It probably was, but it was also perpetrated by
Not
Not
at that stage. That stage was intentional. I'm talking about back in the 20s. Yeah.
Right. No, I'm glad we agree then, because like you mentioned ADM a couple of times.
Yeah.
And corporations are not people. I think we can agree on that too. That's
right.
part of it too.
See, that's why I want to do this, because I know there's more. It's like right now, the healthcare issue. I hear people it's this whole argument now of, we talked about it, Phil, is healthcare a human right? And it's like, I get the philosophical argument about that, as we've discussed, but then it's like when you get past that point, the libertarians and Greens agree that we need to dismantle the health insurance company. So it's like we're getting caught up in these kind of arguments that don't go anywhere. And I wish if we can just get past that. I think 9 out of 10 things that I think there's more agreement, and if the public could see that and start to see that there is really a chance. I mean, I wanted to bring up, Rebecca, because you said it in your speech at the convention. You got like 55,000 votes with $2,500?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, so we just have to figure out a way to break through to the public. And I think, what you're doing, Cubby, and you too, Rebecca, just being in your community the way that you are. But when people on the ground that are there see you, I mean, there's everything's, so much.
Well, see, I think Kelly, one of the things I really believe strongly, because my surrogate father was a political science PhD, so most of the way I approach things is really political science. I don't think that we can do conventional politics to solve this small party problem. It has got to be a mass movement. Like, and the question then, if you buy that premise, like, what is the basis of a mass movement in 2026? And I think Rebecca said it in the opening piece, or maybe Phil did, sort of like food is this one unifying thing that you can cross the political spectrum with, right? And so what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is push this food citizens movement as the mass movement foundation. That we're connecting bellies across the country. And the belly is where the problem is, because Phil was just alluding to it. And I don't think he got his complete point out. But the healthcare system is a problem because of the food system, not because of the health insurance company.
Right.
The health insurance
tied
company,
together, right?
Yeah. So the health insurance company,
health, medicine, all of it, transportation, it's all tied together.
Right. So you have a food system that pushes disease. And then you have a medical system that makes money off the disease, but it starts with the food. And so what we want to do is get people to vote with their stomachs, right? So you say, okay, what politician is speaking to a better food system? Very few. So that would cull a whole bunch of people right there. Like if we can just get people to ask at debates, what is your food plan? If they don't have a good answer, then they're not eligible to get voted for. Just carte blanche, like just off the top. So and then you move into the ones that do have an answer, and then you begin to talk about the farmer citizen, which is a person like me and Rebecca who runs for office who is a farmer or knows food intimately, and that person can offer responses that are not policy wonk responses. They are lived experiences, and that doesn't make them correct, but it makes it authentic. And to Phil's point, you can have an authentic conversation that comes to some reasonable solution because the accountability is based upon your livelihood, not your imagination or your philosophies or what some book you read halfway through. So like this is the political system that I'm trying to build. It's not the Green Party. It's the food citizens movement through the Green Party. And if we can have food citizens in the Libertarian Party, in the Democratic Party, in the Republican Party, or no party at all, because all people eat. Do you eat? Then you're a food citizen if you vote in accordance with your gut, with your belly, with your gastric center. And so it sounds fanciful at first, but if we can connect these dots and cross the demographics across the country, people will begin to see this commonality that they used to see in things like transportation around terms of like how should highways be built? Should they tear through communities with eminent domain, or should we have some kind of respectful, logical planning? Like people did get riled up about this. And let's not talk about labor. Like the labor movement was the last chance we had to make this a decent country. And the reason why it fell apart is because they divide and conquer. So you can't divide somebody's stomach. Either you're eating well or you're not. Either you have diabetes or you don't. Either you have hypertension or you don't. And so how did you get it? How can you not get it? How can your children live a longer life without medicine? And so these are the conversations that we can have across kitchen tables that will revolutionize this country one stomach at a time. And that's why I'm doing the work. If it doesn't work then I'm moving to
it's the kitchen table issue, and that's why we took extra time tonight on this. I really thank you both
we can unite over food. Both parties, and then we can all go out and cut down flock cameras together. How's that sound?
Yes. Excellent.
No, actually, when you eat a meal,
fuck the flock cameras. Fuck the flock cameras.
Yeah.
When you eat a meal with another person, your body, the table that you share with, your bodies release a hormone that's similar to the very hormone that moms with nursing babies release. Yeah, so it's a bonding hormone. That's what happens when you eat a meal with somebody at the same table.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
As a side note.
Yeah, that's why I refused the barbecue with Mitch McConnell. He invited me over, and I just said, "No, Mitch, I'm not eating your corn dogs and none of your food."
That's bad for you. Clearly, it's been bad for him, right?
Yeah. Oh boy, is he even alive? Is it
all those AI photos come out? I don't think so. They'd be putting real photos out if he was alive, right?
He's alive as Lindsey Graham is.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to end this on a funny note, or not really funny, I guess. Well, depends on how you look at it. But I would hope that a whole bunch of bad politicians look at the public reaction to Lindsey Graham's dying and think a little bit more about what they're doing. But I don't know. They're probably so insulated. They only hear.
Well,
I don't think they're too out of touch.
They're getting paid. They don't care.
Yeah, but I
They're
mean, it's been
paid.
really bad. The reaction has been. I mean, just the
it's like Homer Simpson's boss died. What was that guy's name?
Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns.
Oh.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Burns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was really great to meet you, Cubby, and really wonderful to see you again, Rebecca. Yeah. And, I do, like I said, we're going to do a panel on healthcare. I'm just sort of getting that going. And we still will have more new candidates, but I think I want to do a little bit more like one topic focused where we could maybe have a larger panel and have people sort of hash things out. So we'll test it with healthcare and see how that goes.
Sounds
what
good.
Do you think? Okay.
Marcus of Queensbury rules.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we've got to have some good ground rules because it might get heated. If you remember that one we had offline. But okay, so I'm going to end there.
With a libertarian.